Greetings, Internet. Today we're going to do something different. The Equalizers by Softube has just dropped, and I spent a little bit of time yesterday and this morning getting a bit of a feel for it, so let's get started. Opening up the plugin, I just dropped it at the end here. We'll start with the kick drum. We'll go on a couple different instruments, and we'll show sort of some of the features on the Equalizers. This is Softube's answer to the FabFilter Pro Q4 and also the Waves F6. It does a lot of what you sort of would expect with an EQ. It has multiple EQ bands you can just go nuts with. I mean, boosts, cuts, about as many as you want. You could just have a field day. Or you can actually use the EQ. You can also, you've got dynamic functions. So like a Waves F6 or the Pro Q, you can have dynamics functions. You can set your ratios, your release. You've got a lot you can do. This whole readout, sort of, it'll show where your mouse is hovering over what frequency you're on, your gain, and actually the note that you're sitting on. You've got some metering that'll go on once we hit play. You've also got expanded functions from Softube on here, such as input gain. You can listen to your sidechain and adjust your sidechain input. You have high cut and low cuts on here on your left panel. On your bottom panel, which is sort of a Softube standard, you've got a high pass. I believe it's 12 decibel per octave high pass on there. You can invert the phase. And you've got headroom, which less headroom sort of boosts your input, matches on the output. So it causes your compressors and things to and your thresholds to trigger sooner. More input or more headroom means you've got more breathing room. On the right panel, you've got different sort of EQs that you can compare. Right now we're on C because B was the one I was messing with. A is the one I played around with earlier on this kick drum, but we're going to start for scratch and start here. All right, let's turn off that bottom panel. We are going to start with the kick drum. And I'll just sort of do a quick basic EQ with a couple functions. You also have, obviously, external sidechain control, which I have at the moment set up to a snare. But yeah, let's work on this kick. It's an old kick, but we'll show you some features. So one thing, as you hover near your 0 point, your 0 line, or just really anywhere, wherever you double click, it'll add an EQ. And depending on where you are, depends on what type it's just going to put in by default. So if you're far on the left, it's going to throw in a high pass. If you're far on the right, it's going to throw in a low pass. If you're just a little farther in, it's going to do a shelf. Same thing on the left side. And then when you're more in the middle, it'll automatically do a bell curve. So we're going to start with a high pass here. So I wrote it down earlier. My kick is at 64. I'm going to adjust my... So you can go all the way up to 48 decibels per octave on your slope on your high pass, which is huge. We're going to be pretty aggressive. We'll do 24. You can see your RTA here is going to do post what your EQ is doing, which is pretty nice. It's a bit of a pain on drums. As you can see, it's pretty low on my screen. If you want to increase it, just drop your headroom a little bit so you can see a little more. Not the best idea because you might be triggering some other stuff, but give you a better view of what's going on. Another thing this EQ does, which is fantastic, it sort of you can use other Softube EQs on top of it, so it's actually sort of a dual section equalizer. You've got this main screen, which lets you do everything you would on a FabFilter, but you've got this vintage section. I'll pop up in my menu here, and you can basically drag in any EQs from Softube that you already own. I do not own the entire collection because I do not have that much money, but I have a fair few. Go to the American Class A, which you can then do some boosts and cuts on there. You can also decide which order you want it, after or before your modern. Your modern is the main one that you're using, which is fantastic. I'll go through that a bit more in a minute. All right, so let's look at our kick drum. So you can see there's crazy stuff going on. If you hover over to where my 64 is, bring that back, bring this in. You can see there's sort of a peak here on your RTA. So if you hover near your point, you can scroll and narrow or widen out your bandwidth and sort of drag I'm going to turn that off. Do another one here. Drag and drop. You can also solo bands, which is fantastic. So if I'm looking for that snap where that snare's hitting, that works. Now one thing I can then do, turn on to an exterior side chain, drop this down. Speed that up, shall we? Move that. Change your threshold so it hits a little harder. Make sure my snare side chain's doing what it needs to do. Good. All right. Hear where that's hitting. You can also turn off bands. There's another one going on right here. We're actually going to make this bigger. All right, I'm going to bring in one I did earlier on this kick. So here, actually let's back this up a little bit. Going to our vintage, if I want to use my American Class A, I can do some cuts and boosts on here, which makes life real simple. Okay, here's one I did earlier. So this is with the American Class A, and you see I got some boosts on the top end, cuts, boost. Nice little smile. And here's my graphic representation. That little blue line is that vintage. You can turn them on or off down here. That'll change your EQ, obviously. You can also turn on or off your main EQ. All right, I'm going to hit play. So I boosted the fundamental, did a lot of drops, and then a few dynamic. So I got one that's just dynamic on the kick, one that is a dynamics on the side chain right here. There we go with. All right, moving on to a bass guitar. Just gonna solo this. All right. So what we ended up doing here is here's without. So really, I mean, lots of boosts that I probably shouldn't be doing. I'm actually just sort of upping the average, so doing a little bit of expansion, basically. Let me show you what we did here. So first things first, we added Solo this. Add a low pass. Now we're pretty good on the low end, but if we hover near these low mids right here, which is sort of the meat, we're going to be really aggressive. So that. There you go. All right, we're going to do some dynamics on here. Speed that up. Speed up that release. So the attack goes down to 5 milliseconds. With the F6, you can do about a half millisecond, which is super duper fast. Now, if you do this and just turn it on, so it's not doing exactly what I want. You're actually doing negative ratios. And what that's going to do, let me get to the bass part again. Okay. Aside from arguing with me. So what I want to do is just sort of, as the bass is a little quieter, it brings the low end up, or those low mids up, and it actually, as it gets louder, it stops boosting them. So it just lets what's naturally there come out. So it's a little bit of expansion on that low mid. So what I'm going to do is bring up this threshold, turn this ratio. I'm going to not be so drastic with that ratio. You can also choose how much you're boosting. Yeah, I'm going to bring up that. So it's going to be barely a difference that you're going to be noticing. I'm actually going to do it right here as well. About that 500-600 hertz mark. You'll hear this more than you would on the 200-ish range, but so what it's doing is that it's going to put that mid right there. Actually, it's going to cause it to punch through a bit more. So here's without. Here's with. Which is great. All right, we're going to move on to a vocal real quick. There we go. So here I was playing with an F6. I was actually doing broadband compression using this first band, but we won't be doing that here. We're going to move on to the equalizer. All right. So typically I will, normally I'll do EQing, and then after I'm done with my broadband compression and everything else, I will do whatever dynamic EQing I'm doing. I don't like doing that first thing in my chain. We are experimenting this round, so I did sort of everything. The Chandler TG channel, or the curve bender on here, which I really do on a vocal, but it was a lot of fun. Just really, really light, so dB and a half, 2 dB cut, and sort of everything was, well, at max about a 6 dB cut. Playing with a de-esser up top and also a plosive control on this shelf down here. But let's start from scratch, and we'll experiment on a vocal, which is why everyone is here. So this is from an old reggae song we did probably 10, 12 years ago. So what I ended up doing on here, let's go from scratch, but I ended up doing just a bunch of cuts. This shelf here and this shelf here are both dynamic, and I've got 2 dynamic bands right here in my mids. Typically, I will do a lot of general processing, so I'll do my standard, just my static EQ and my broadband compression first before I get into any dynamic EQing or any. I tried doing both. I'm also attempting to use this as a de-esser. We'll go through this. Ended up using the TG, the curve bender from Chandler Limited on here, and sounds great actually. I might start doing that. I almost have never used this on a vocal before. Usually I just use it on buses. I may change that after this. All right, we'll start from scratch. Make sure bypass is turned off. All right.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
All right, first thing I'm going to do is add a high pass.
You may strike first and I may strike.
There's something going on down here. Sounds like I think there's a kick drum in another
You
room.
may strike first and I.
Or it's the headphones.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
Just doing the high pass at 151, 18 decibel. Is it cut per octave on the slope, and
you may strike first and I may strike harder.
All right, next thing I'm doing is do a cut. This is about 500. So this right here, this is just me scrolling the mouse to change the bandwidth. And
you may strike first and I may strike harder. I'll be the bridge across troubled water.
Turn that off.
I'll be your best man and I'll be your brother.
Looks like I got a lot of energy, about 1600. Do a cut there.
You may strike first and I may strike harder. I'll be the bridge across troubled water. I'll be your best man and I'll be your brother. You may strike first and I may.
All right, there's something going on in his voice that I don't like. Like a little nasally. It's not too bad, but
you may strike first and I may strike harder.
There.
I'll be the bridge across troubled water.
All right. Now, in the other example I actually did this dynamically. You can do that too. We'll play with that.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
What we are going to do...
You may strike first and I may...
There. A3.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
A551. So if you look where I'm hovering my mouse, where it does that shelf, and it actually gives you a readout on the top center of the screen where you're hovering. So that's A6. I'm going to do a bell curve there. I'm going to do a dynamic, speed that up. This is where a de-esser would probably come in more handy, but we're just doing an experiment here. I'm going to narrow that down, drop that to about 12.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
And bring that till he's only doing it on the S's. I'm actually going to speed this up to 120 milliseconds.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
Let's turn the buffer settings down so you can actually visualize this a little better.
There. You may strike first and I may strike hard.
All right, turn up the ratio.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
That just means it's compressing those frequencies just a larger, much larger amount, much more larger ratio, hence the name. Instead of like a 3-to-1 ratio, so every 3 dB over that threshold drops down to 1. It's every 10 dB drops down to 1, so it's much more squishy.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
Okay, let's listen to it without.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
And with.
I'll be the bridge across troubled water. I'll be a bet. You may strike first and I may strike harder.
And again.
You may strike first and I may strike harder. You may strike first and I may strike harder.
So yeah, that helps. All right, another thing I did on my last one is I added. So I'll do this live a lot to tame plosives because people are holding mics right up to their faces. I'm going to create about 300. This isn't going to production. Speed this up. I'm actually going to speed up the release. We'll have some fun with it.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
So what I'm doing here
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
Is basically on this low end that every time it gets a little too much, I'm actually going to drop that down.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
So every time that low end gets a little too out of control, it just bends it back down into shape.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
That evens it all out. Okay, here is where we were originally.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
Lift it on.
I'll be the bridge across troubled water.
All right, so overall, great EQ. Quick, easy. You can move around really quick. Doesn't seem to be working in console 1 yet. Atmosphere, which I would like them to get to soon. But it's quick, very utilitarian, and great sounding EQ. Let's move over to the vintage section real quick. All right. We'll do the channeler.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
Do a cut around 800 hertz just to clear out that mid-range.
You may
one.
strike first and I may strike harder.
Give him a little more body, so this will be a shelf.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
And do a little more air.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
All right, one thing that happened is I'm going to drop the threshold on these S's. Just made them stand out a bit more.
You may strike first and I may strike harder.
So overall, great. I wish I could do some broadband dynamics on here like I can the F6. Love my ability to solo frequencies. It's good sounding. And having my 2 EQs in there basically really just speeds things up, so I wanted to be doing any of that later. I won't be able to be dragging other plugins or other EQ, like my character plugins, which I usually like to do. Overall, really, really good. Hope you guys learned something and enjoy the plugin. Have a good day.